This is Real Black History Part 4. Pretty sure it's Part 4, and I'll go back and check. If not, this is a short segment, actually, just to catch up on a few things I may have left out that I wanted to tie in but didn't have time in the last video. and the if I do more parts, it'll be tying in the psychology, the effects psychologically and spiritually of the history, those kind of things, and then just throwing in extra stuff I could have left out that I've thought of before, right? And studied before. So I'll just start with 1 John. This is going to be short, but this is going to be about ancestry. Just one main ancestry point, and then whatever else I throw in that I remember, I'll do real quick. It has to be under 15 minutes, so I hope it's 5 to 10 minutes. 1 John 4:8. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. 1 John 1:8. Not verbatim, but if we say we have no sin, we make God a liar, and the truth is not in us. So we have to know we're a sinner to know that we trust there's a perfect God. So that's for people who think they're perfect and better than everybody else, right? We're all sinners. You could also say Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All right, so that also fits. Those are my favorite verses. The first one is, he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. So, because a lot of people are afraid of the love thing because there's fake loves, right? But anyway, that's who God is. He showed it on the cross. Showed unconditional love on the cross. But it is conditional, by the way. It's conditional on whether we choose him or not. And other things. So, but we're all neighbors. We're all from Adam and Eve. Black history, to summarize, we're all from Adam and Eve. We all came from Noah's family after the flood. We came from the black ethnicity came from Ham's line, but generally, specifically, started with language change. When God changed language at the Tower of Babel, that's where we all the ethnicities moved to different parts by language where they could understand each other's language. That's how we got ethnicities. So, ancestry. So, Thomas Jefferson ended slave imports. He outlawed slave imports in about 1807. Someone debate 1806 or 1808, but it's 1807, pretty sure, is the official. And 1807. So, slavery was outlawed in 1865 by Abraham Lincoln, the president, Christian Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. They want to hide and lie about all that, right? So, because they don't want freedom still. Obviously, I mean, one thing that should be obvious to people is that, because they're not playing too many tricks on it, is that the Democrat Party is against freedom, right? Can't you see that? They're against freedom. They're not against, so real freedom, moral freedom. They're for immoral freedom, the freedom to kill, murder, do whatever you want. So they're for that, and then they act all picky about, they make a big deal about the smallest sins, and somebody may have done once in their life, and they're not actively doing it. So when the Bible talks about murderers and thieves and thieving and stuff like that, those are sins against our neighbors, for one. So we have to govern that. But it's usually talking about people who are actively doing that and still they haven't repented, and they still support it in some way, or they support groups that do it. And it's not always condemning the person who murdered somebody. It has, if they were repentant and they can be forgiven and move on, and have Cain, in the beginning of the Bible, Cain killed his brother Abel. God let him live. He didn't do the death penalty, but he could have, and it's on the table. But he sent him to another country or something, right? He wasn't in a good position necessarily. He was impoverished or a poor man, I guess. But generally, so you have slavery. I forget what point I was going to leave out about Abraham Lincoln and stuff, but generally, I was giving background on, it's different. That was an extra point than what we think it is. Slavery was beginning to end around 1807, and I want to clarify this while I'm on that point. The United States never had slavery. We weren't a developed country. We weren't a country, we weren't a developed country until we called ourselves the United States of America. When we ended slavery, that's when we had finally established freedom from Britain, freedom to establish, and freedom from the South to be equal nations and not totally separate. They weren't completely separate, but they were separate in their laws. The Southern Democrats had the slavery, the Yankees did not. And so, but wanted to join the United States to ensure strength to end slavery, but also to ensure strength against Britain and other countries and establish ourselves as a sovereign, they call it sovereign, united, strong nation, right, with borders, right? So we did that. We made peace with Indians. That's the facts. And they've made peace with us, right? So people who are trying to create that issue again, that's the same type of politics that are, it's Islamic related. Islam likes to use those politics to fight over land and stuff. Well, so they don't back away from that. Now, that's not just the terror groups doing that. That's Islamic nations and Islamic supporters like Obama and everybody else. He wanted to restart the fight for Indian land and everything here and fight instead of, they claim they're not against, he doesn't really claim to be against violence much, I guess. But Biden's doing that. They're all doing that for world power. It's not for various motives they have. So I'll get to the ancestry point, but I wanted to give some background that made me remember some points I had not said before. So you have, I wanted to reiterate, that we weren't a country yet. We were fighting for freedom against Britain. Britain was bringing slaves at the time. And now what's funny about that is Britain ended slavery in 1807 too, when Thomas Jefferson did. They actually ended slavery, or they ended slave imports the same way. No more slave imports from Africa. And that's a key point to this video, to ancestry. All right? So we'll just go straight to the ancestry. You got people, you'll hear people talk about how the Americans would steal slaves, kidnap people and make them slaves. Not true. Not true before 1807. They didn't need to. Africa was selling their prisoners, their criminals, their worst behaved people. They were selling to America, giving us the worst ones, the hardest ones to get along with. That's a fact. And, so that's, part of the study I'm going to do, or the analysis, is how did that pass on down? Because they've always, even back then, believe it or not, they were, probably claiming racism and all that falsely, a lot of them, just like they do now, the criminals now, the ones that are hard to get along with, the ones that hurt people, the ones that steal from people, and then claiming racism if they were tried to be enforced against. So, but that was the trick that got played by having those people sent to America. And so I kind of suspect that maybe the POWs, the honorable slaves, were sent to Brazil, but Brazil got most of the slaves. So here's the point, though, about ancestry. They were not kidnapping people. They got slaves. Africa was getting rid of their prison population. And that was good for Africa in a way. But now they're calling us racist if we don't obey their prisoners. They're the thieves and murderers if we don't obey them, right? They call America racist. So that's probably the Islamic facet that's still doing it, because they want that new world order where Islam runs everything, right? And you're an Islamophobe if you don't obey Islam, right? So it's a false religion. So here's your ancestry, right? So after 1807, the Democrats probably kidnapped slaves, because it was after the law that banned, they weren't allowed to get slaves anymore. So then, but guess what? Where did those slaves come from? Northern Africa countries, Nigeria, Niger. I'm not looking at a map, so I can't tell you, but it's northeastern Africa for the most part is where the slaves were sold by Africa during the slave trade. They still have slavery today. It was outlawed way, 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 way after the rest of the world, or after Britain and America outlawed it. And so they kept going with it. And there's Islamic slavery still in parts of the country illegally, because they finally outlawed it. But it's Islamic-based, Islamic run that's doing it. And so they falsify that America did it. America's a brand new country. It wasn't even an established country yet. They're not even a country. They're the last country in the world, last big country established to ever have slavery. They did not have it very long in comparison. And the point is, I say they, so somebody will say, that's not true. They have 400 years. Not exactly. No, not 400 years. Not exactly. It was legal for the southern part of the United States for that amount of time, I guess. But they weren't even established. They weren't a country. They at that point they were building. There was building going on in the South using slaves, and that includes some of the southeastern before you get to the Mason-Dixon line, and even Delaware was a slave state. So it's not the North would be Minnesota, Kentucky. There may have been a line in the middle of Kentucky, but generally Kentucky was not a slave state. It was part of the Yankees, or at least half of it was. I don't know if the line went right through. And then, New York was not a slave state. The New England states were not slave states. Maryland was in between. It was like a holder place. Let's see, Virginia was, but it was still kind of in between, like a holding place, I forget what they call it, but it was more like they didn't do. A lot of Virginians didn't do the same level of slavery as the southern states, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, and I don't know who else. But Florida, I think even Florida. But you had, so those are the main slave states, we'll put it like that. But Brazil was bigger. Brazil had more slavery than any of them. So I'm validating those points, but till 1807, it was legal to bring slaves. After 1807, it wasn't. That's when the kidnapping started. So the kidnapping started after they made it illegal to get slaves, not before. Not before. We were given criminal slaves and prisoner of war slaves from civil wars. And all right, so we made that point clear, right? I think it's good to do that, actually. So as much as that bored some people, it's good to make that point clear. You have, and I wish I could have cleared it even more, right? But it's 12 minutes. So you have the slaves were taken from Northeast Africa when it was legal. When it was illegal, where did they kidnap the slaves? So your ancestor, if you're a black ethnicity, you might be an ancestor of Angola. Most of the slaves that were kidnapped came from Angola, Africa, which is in the southern part of Africa, right? So a lot of people here are from Angola, not from Northeast Africa. So that brings me to another point. When you take blood tests to see what your ancestry is, I don't trust those things. I kind of want to take one to see if I have some Cherokee in me. I was told I did, and then I was told I didn't. For 20 years, I was told I did, and then I was told, I know your great-great-grandfather was not Cherokee, But... So let's say, how can you tell? You got the black ethnicities mostly in Africa. So what's the difference between, why would somebody in South Africa have a different blood test result than somebody in Nigeria? They're all, and by the way, how does that test differently than, Noah from the flood? He's a father to all of the Africans and to everybody. His sons are the ones that dispersed in the world, right? So all blood tests have to have something in common with Noah directly. Noah himself, and his wife. And before that, from Adam and Eve, we all have a common blood test result. So you have, but my point here, the key point to that is, what if they say you have blood that is in sync with Congo, people from the Congo, but maybe they weren't so somebody from the Congo moved, but maybe they weren't from the Congo. Their blood test coincides with people from the Congo, but they actually are from Jamaica or had moved to South Africa. Whoever is responsible for your blood, which great-great-grandfather is responsible for being the strongest part of your bloodline. So I'm like, it's not going to be accurate, because guess what? I could have blood from, you could trace me back to maybe England or where else? Scotland. And so, which one, first of all, which test is going to come through? The Scotland on my mom's side or the England on my dad's side? Which blood test are they going to say I'm from? And by the way, maybe they weren't Scottish and English. Maybe they moved from Ireland. Maybe they moved from Israel, of all places. Maybe they had just migrated there from Israel, and I'm not really. So that would make my bloodline be what? Israel or not? Does it go back that far? Why doesn't it? If it goes back to a certain time when they're testing your bloodline, how come it doesn't go back to further before that? Hey, your blood's from Adam and Eve. I mean, so I don't know how accurate those things are. I imagine it could tell me if I had Cherokee, but how? What's the difference? There's A and B positive. See, you got A, type O, type. That's real with people. Type O, I think it is. I forget. But generally, those are the two types of blood. So maybe they can test whether you have more vitamin D in it. I'm not sure what they're testing. But generally, you may be an ancestor of Angola, of the kidnapped portion, or you may be from Northeast Africa. And then on the other hand, so how can they really tell you if you're descendants of slave unless you followed your ancestry yourself? And they've kept a booklet, which that's a lot of work, man. And so, especially if you were ancestor of a criminal, of a murderer, what if you're an ancestor of a murderer from Africa that was sold into slavery, and he's lost track of all, he or she has lost track. Yes, lemon murder too. So he lost track of all his family members in Africa. And he only started a new family line right here in America. If one that survived and repented and did the right thing. And married while in America and started creating a family, right? So how do you trace all that? You can't trace that. You can't. It had to be traced by bookkeeping for the most part. You have to have bookkeeping. So I don't trust those all the way. But your ancestry, bottom line, our ancestry, we know that the darker skinned people came from Africa, and that's related to living close to the equator partly for a long time. And probably might be also the gene that Noah's son had, that gene maybe, and so people that came before the flood, I don't think there's a lot of history about geography and stuff before the flood as far as how ethnicities, how they spread around. And there wasn't, I don't know that there was a long period of life on Earth before the flood, maybe 2,000 years. That's one thing I hadn't studied. I hadn't heard anybody talk about specifically. They might have made a quick point about it and moved on. But there was probably, before the flood, you had Methuselah lived 969 years. Adam lived close to that, I think. And then you don't hear about too many more generations back then. And so I'm going to guess 1,500 to 2,000 years might be all there was before the flood. So we don't, based on that, so how many people moved to Africa from the, before the flood, you had the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So actually, I think some of those are from Africa. So, but they do go all the way up into Iraq or somewhere, which is far, I guess. I don't know. That's something I'd have to look at. But think about that. And I'm looking at the truth here. I'm not trying to say, oh, no, it's this. Because of this, I want it to favor my skin tone. This is where it's from. No, it doesn't matter. But before that, so they could be. So I don't know the ethnicity and skin tone before the flood, right? We just know that generally dark skin tone does come from Africa, which is close to the equator and makes sense. Your body adapts to protecting your skin from with the natural plants there help your body adapt to having skin that is protected from the equator, the sun rays and stuff. So lineage, anybody can be mixed, Moses mixed. So that's the main things I wanted to point out in this video. And if I think of something real quick, I will. But if not, this is part 4 of real Black American history. Because the truth is, they do use Black American History Month. They have Black History Month to talk about Black American History Month, only in part. They only talk about the slavery side. They don't talk about the slave owners. They don't talk about, I want to mention George Washington Carver. He's a well-known, successful person. Now I forget his story, to be honest, but I forget a lot of things. But I think he was a slave, but he became a good scientist, historian, and something. He became a popular person who had some good successes, but was a Christian man too. A well-behaved man, not just well-behaved, but Christian. I mean, he had Christian beliefs, and so you got a lot of those stories like that. We do hear some of them. We hear about only the ones that overcame discrimination, big time discrimination. So, but let's be real. I mean, a lot of the discrimination was created because this is a fact. I mean, this is obvious because you had a lot of the population of the black population that was sent here were people that don't get along with anybody, and they didn't get along with anybody in Africa because they were put in jail because they don't get along with people. They don't love their neighbors. They didn't have convictions about stealing. They didn't have. That's the crowd that was sent to America. So it would be, it's so. Some people became prejudiced, and the ones that are prejudiced had small minds and thought, "Oh, black people are that way." No, it's not, and it comes from their skin culture. Nope, we did get the worst of the bunch from Africa, but we also got some of the best too. We got some of the best, most well-behaved, most honorable people with the prisoners of war. However, it is possible that those prisoners of war were sent to Brazil on purpose, and that the misbehaving, the neighbor-hating Africans that were sent here were the criminal, but were sent here by Britain because Britain wanted to take over America. They didn't want us having freedom. So I'm just saying, the way we're taught to hate all white people in America today, right? Even me, white people are taught to hate white people. We're taught. I mean, that's what Democrats teach us. We're supposed to hate ourselves. I hate myself. Okay, I'm going to hate myself, Mr. CNN, because I'm white. Mr. MSNBC, I'm going to hate myself because I'm white. I have nothing to do with that. I've had a view from a young age, luckily. I've had a view of Christ's biblical view and thought we're all one human race. All right. And so I've had a lot of sins as a Christian too. So, I get picked on because how can you be a Christian and sin? And all that. So I sinned after being a Christian, not before, because I wasn't a Christian. I was saved young. But there's so many lies in society and stuff that I won't use that as my excuse. There's a lot of lies. I'm the type that wanted to get married. I wanted to marry somebody real, not fake. But we're all taught to be fake, and education teaches us to be fake. Our educational system teaches us to be fake. It does. So I just wasn't seeing anybody. It wasn't just that I didn't see anybody being in the educational system. I am not a good student. I've tried it. I'm a good student because I worked at it. I worked harder at it than most to be a decent student, but I couldn't be a perfect straight A student. And then I did trumpet and sports, so that limited my study time too. But so you had then I had a girlfriend that limited it at one point. And I had depression after being assaulted my second year in college, and that affected me. But generally, I didn't feel, if I met a lady that was smart, book smart and stuff, I didn't feel adequate. I felt inadequate to date. So that's my fault. That's part. So as far as, but that happens. So, but I wasn't college material. So technically, I brought that up. But so this is something black and white people have in common. Our system is a little weird in some ways, and it's got a lot of goodness to it, a lot of good things to it. But the truth is, it's the Democrats. It is the Democrats. They've played on it in a way to make it weird. They've perverted every bit of it, and everything good they pervert. They do, and on purpose, not on accident. Some of so it can easily be done on accident too. But so Republicans have bought into some of it on accident. But anyhow, so the Republican Party is the party of Christ. It is. The Democrat Party is the party of slavery. And, they're trying to change that, but the Republican Party is the party of Christ. The Democrat Party is the party of slavery. And so I'll throw in one more argument because I'm not to 30 minutes yet. And I've gone over my 15 goal, but that's okay. This part 4 can be a full part. And So people will argue, what about the slavery it talks about in the Bible? Well, they didn't have, when the first world ended, at some point slavery, it was called servanthood, which is different in a way, but it's employees. You could call today's employee a slave. I'm a slave. I take on a job. And I agree to be their slave in a sense, for 10 hours, but then I get to clock out. I get to clock out. I have no bind to them until tomorrow. No bind, unless you take on, unless you're part of the management or whatever. You don't have anything, or if you want to, they might call you to take somebody else's shift and you get paid overtime or whatever. But for a lot of jobs, not all jobs, but a lot of jobs, once you're clocked out, you don't have any responsibility to the job. So you're not on call or anything. So for that amount of time, I've agreed to be in a contract, enslave myself to a contract for every year, hopefully the rest of my life. On a lot of jobs, you want to keep the job and have steady income, right? That's an agreement, but it's not total slavery because you're getting paid. And so, but we're all a slave to having to work. Ever since the fall, when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the tree they weren't supposed to eat of, right? And so Eve made us all be a slave. So, but in a sense, we won't go into that psychological stuff. It's not, but bottom line is the relevant part is we were bound to eat from, God made us a slave to the ground in order to survive overall. Everybody doesn't have to be a farmer, but we all have to wash our clothes. We all have to worry about getting clean clothes, all that stuff. They didn't have to worry about that before the fall. So we do, to a degree, we are a slave no matter what. We always have to work to live. We have to work. We have to cook. We have to find the money to eat. We have to find a way every day. No matter if you're 90-something years old and can't walk, you got to figure something out to survive. So we're slave to survival tactics. But what we've actually done is created better systems, neighborly systems to help each other survive and look out for each other, protect our property. So you're not having to work and be a slave all over again and replace stolen property. And you got to do it. And so our drug cartels, they do that to people all the time, make them slaves. They take people's whole paycheck and say, get out of here. And they make them go work again. And if they want a friend, they've lost all their friends because of that. And then if they want a friend again, they can take a breather and go hang with them again and think they're not going to get robbed again. And then they steal everything they have. They're making slaves out of people. They might make them even lose their jobs. So they don't care. They want you to come be a part of the dealing group then, or start making some more slaves somewhere else because you're that desperate, out of desperation. So some people would say, no excuse. They won't listen to all this. But that's the methods. That it works somewhat. It sometimes works, but most people don't want to steal and hurt other people. I mean, even people who don't believe in God, they don't see much sense in it or how to get any success, but they like the drugs, stuff like that. So, but my point is, all people, we've created a system that prevents us from abusing each other. So work methods, but slavery, but back then we hadn't created those methods in the Bible. So the Bible is not teaching slavery. It's teaching it had the system back then wasn't actually like the extreme slavery form that we had that came to America from Africa, and from Africa. Started in Africa. I don't know how it all started in Britain and all them, but the Africans are the ones that had an overflux of slaves to sell and stuff. They created an overflux because they had to have that slave system going. They didn't just come up with it brand new and have all these slaves available. So they had, they had a system going there. They definitely still have it going today more than everybody else, except for India. India has it. I don't know the whole story, but India is the leading slave nation in the world, I think. And most of the people we know from India are intellectuals. So I don't know how that works out. Whereas a lot of the tribal culture has been protected in Africa a lot of times by Democrats, because where did they get their slaves from sometimes? Tribes that were not educated in a lot of ways and who stuck to their traditions that didn't want to move forward. So, there's a lot of effects people don't think about. It's not, but I want to not forget my main point. It's almost 30 minutes again. Can't believe it. And so you have, man, I forgot where I was. I'm sorry. I got to get that point out. I know I was on a good point and I got on a rabbit trail. But you have, I'm blank. There's 3 points I could go back to. I got to get back to that main one. So you have, anyway, you have ancestry effects in the United States. We weren't a country. I said that. You have, I'm going to have to end it, I guess, because, man, I don't want to mess this video up. We have, but you have, I was on a rabbit trail, but it was a real rabbit trail about how the effects of slavery is. You got the South, I'm really fishing here. So you have, let's just go back to some other main point. You got the southern states had the slavery, the northern states didn't. So for the people who keep picking on us, all white, and they've taught people to hate all white people, I just want to go back to even previous point. 6% of white people had, not white people, 6.5%, period, had slaves. That includes white people, black slave owners, white slave owners, masters, white slave masters, black slave masters, Indian slave masters. 6.5% is the number. So that means that you had 95% of people did not have slaves or any involvement in slavery generally. I won't generally to not any involvement, but definitely no slave. So they didn't have slaves. And so to hate all white people for slavery is a trick. They've taught you that trick because they're mad that we ended slavery. I promise you, that's the bottom line. Because they want communists. They're mad that we ended the communistic scheme that slavery leads to. When you have government power running slavery. So, but obviously we still have slavery in the drug cartels and the prison system they create. That they actually enjoy putting people in prison. The cartels, your good buddies that say they hate prison and all this. They send each other to prison. They want to send you to prison. They want to get you to steal and take a chance to go to prison. And they're happy if you don't go to prison too. But you get more stripes and stuff if you go to prison. You get more rank if you go to prison. But so that's a slave system because they've traded being able to steal people's apartments and live. They'll be homeless, but steal somebody's apartment and all those kind of things because they're making more slaves, basically. But they get money. They take the risk because they're like, we get money. If we don't, we're extorting and getting people's money. If we don't get caught, we get to stay in the apartment, steal an apartment, steal a house, steal. They're stealing. And anybody you steal from, you've made them into your slave, especially if you're repeatedly stealing from them. That's slavery. So I do remember my old point now. Back to the slavery, we created a system of free market system, capitalist system. And so they call it capitalism because that's the bad side of it. You still have to make rules, and there's always going to be a flaw in a system, but it's about the best system there is. And it's not true that it's a good system by itself like the libertarians teach. It's not a good system by itself without the handout stuff. That's a sarcastic name for handout. It's a graceful system. It's thought of because of God being the one nation under God is how we came up with the welfare and everything else. But it's not what we live off of. We have to realize welfare is something to help us get back on our feet or extend us. Some people are disabled permanently, mentally, but they're supposed to work on it and try to get it back. But then they make rules. Democrats have made rules to where people can't, if they get caught working for 5 minutes, that they get kicked off, weird stuff. They kick them off the thing, but these people aren't capable of working more than a full job. Or if they do, they'll probably keep it 2 weeks and lose it, and then they have nothing. That's how some people are mentally. So why not be proud and happy that people do charity? They can be on disabled and do charitable work, something that they naturally have a hobby for, but they can't guarantee consistency. And it's beneficial, though, if they're doing positive things like that. Why not embrace that? And so why use the drug system to steal people's houses and let drug cartels do that? Legalize properly, and then crack down on it when it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to crack down on drug dealers and stuff now because the laws are so skewed. You have to some because they're so violent. But go after the thieves, go after the people who harm people. And so how does that tie into? So I'm saying that we've created this. I want to end it with this. We created a system. I guess my new medicine is making my nose itch. It's cholesterol medicine. But I've noticed some medicines make your nose hairs itch and all that. If you do too much ibuprofen even or something, it does that to me. But this is cholesterol medicine. And so you have the free market system is one of the best to keep us away from slavery. That's the best deterrent of slavery because it's actually easy to make somebody a slave. You just want to make sure that you got enough money to invest and keep this job going. So you're going to short somebody on a payment, and that's almost like treating them like a slave. But you're doing right. You're not. So you get stuff tough about it. Won't explain it. You don't have time to explain it. But where does the revenue come from to pay them? I mean, it doesn't grow on trees. I don't know. It amazes me how people are able to keep paying everybody, especially consistently. It's like almost, but if you're working together and you're not paying a person as much as they want, and in real life situation, like when you're building and not established, we're pretty established. But when you're doing that and you agree, you're going to pay part of the proceeds to the person you worked with. Well, and they might not agree. You gave them enough. Well, you're like, but they have to agree because I can't stay in business if I pay you more than that. And I can't get your money tomorrow if you work for me tomorrow. But I might have to cut your hours short so I can have enough to pay you. We're not pulling in revenue. We're working and we're getting this place built, but it's not pulling in revenue. So you got to charge somebody else the money. I mean, it's amazing how it ends up working out more than as much as it has, but it does. So, but people have to understand and work with each other and understand. In order for the business to continue, we got to do this, and we got to make some sacrifices. But I'm not making a slave out of you. I'm paying you everything I can that I can afford to pay you to stay in business. So people used to recognize that a little bit more, right? So the way it works now, I don't know how money just keeps. I can't figure it out. I can't. It doesn't. I can't comprehend it. How it just keeps working, but it works a lot of times. And then if it doesn't, they go out of business. They close down the business. But that's a system that's created so we're encouraged to pay people and treat people fairly in the bottom line. And they want to get rid of that system. What do you do then? We all got to survive. We got to find ways to survive. They're going to be able to tell you where to work and all this kind of stuff and give you slave wage, what you call slave wage, a real slave wage, where you never get anything extra. And so the government's getting it all, or it might not even be based on it. It may be based on credit, but you're stuck doing what they want you to do. You have to be productive for the government. And that's the system they're trying to apply. And then the government's supposed to take care of everybody. But what they're going to have is major police that keeps everybody in order, the New World Order and all. It's a slave system. It's going to be a slave system, and you're going to have the worst police in the history of the world. Right now, we have one of the best, if not the best police system in the history of the world. It's been compromised. It's hard to make them good because the truth is the Black Lives Matter and all them. That's really Black Lives Don't Matter. And they're trying to use them as communist groups are trying to use them to chase the good police out and put bad police in. They're trying to scare good police from wanting to be part of the police department. And they want bad police. It's the opposite of what they're saying. I promise you that. And I think I'll end on that note. Amen. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. 1 John 4:8.